Okay, this recording is for the pre-algebra classes. We are doing one-step and two-step equations. So things are a little bit hectic right now in class because some of you guys are still working on a sheet that looks like this, and others are working on a sheet that look like these. Okay, so what I'm going to do is do some of the problems from here, and then I'll do half of your homework with some of the problems from here. Okay, so if you need to fast forward through the video, go ahead and do that. If you need to get to this section of the homework, if that's what you have for tonight. If you're actually, let me go back, because if you are actually doing this section of your homework tonight, okay, and don't only do the first 2 pages, not all 4 pages. So the first 2 pages, which is 1 page front and back, don't do the last 2. If you're already on this part of the homework, that means you have completed every problem on this homework. This entire homework, which is like 28 problems, must be completed first. We've been doing this for 2 days now, this part of the homework, okay? But some of us are still working on these, so I'm going to do some of these with you in order to help you complete this part of the homework if you're still on these, which is okay. All right, so now I'm actually going to start with number 15, which looks like this. So this is on that last page of that sheet that I gave you is here. So I'm going to do some of these problems to help you along. Feel free to follow and copy down the answers. However, if you copy down the answers, I'm expecting that you will also show the work that goes along with it, because showing the work will help you understand the process of doing these types of problems. So here we go. So starting with number 15. So with these two-step equations, this is the format that I would like for you to use, okay? So remember, you have this side of the street, what's on this side of the equal sign, and this side of the equal sign. Your job is to get the letter P by itself. When we have two-step equations, you add or subtract first, especially when you have normal-looking fractions. You're going to add or subtract something out first. So if you look on this side of the street, remember I'm trying to get P by itself, I would have to add or subtract something first. I see I can subtract something, and that would be the 8. The reason why I said subtract it is because it's already added. See, this is a plus 8. So you do the opposite of what you see, which would be subtract 8. So if I subtract 8 on both sides, it looks like this. Okay? Remember, what you do to one side of the street, you have to do to the other. And what happens is, this canceled out, didn't it? A plus 8 and a negative 8 is going to give you 0. So I'm going to bring my P minus 4 back down. That's 0, so I'm not going to do anything with it. I'm just going to not bring anything down. Then I have 7 minus 8, which is a negative 1. Don't forget your integer rules. If you don't remember how to do integers, go back to the Heart Academy and print off one of the integer rules cheat sheets that are there. Okay? So now I took care of part 1 of the equation. Part 2 of the equation, because remember it's a two-step, is this. I still got to get P by itself. So there's my street, this side and this side. So fractions mean division, right? So we're going to divide out the number 4 in order to get P by itself. By doing the opposite, it means to multiply. If fractions mean division, I'm going to do the opposite of division, which is multiply. I'm going to multiply the 4 out. But remember, what I do to this side of the street, I also have to do to this side of the street. So here's your 4. Excuse the bad handwriting. You know how hard it is to write with a mouse. Okay? So here's the important part that some people are getting confused on, and it's okay, is that long story short, this is not 16. This is actually going to lead you to 1 and bring your P back down. I know you're thinking, I'm looking at this, Mrs. Hart, this is 16. But remember, I show you the shortcut way of getting P by itself instead of the long version of getting P by itself. But I'm going to show you the long version just so that you understand, and I'll do that after solving this problem. Because go back to remember what we have to do. We multiply by 4 on this side, you got to multiply by 4 on this side. So negative 1 times 4 is negative 4. Remember, 1s are invisible, right? So there, P equals negative 4. So let me go back and explain why this is not 16. Because if you don't understand why this is not 16, you're going to end up with a wrong answer every time, okay? So remember the original P over 4, right? Here it is over here. Remember, I'm just explaining why this is not 16, and I just did a shortcut version on paper of what to do. I know I'm going to multiply with 4 in order to get rid of it, okay? So what I'm doing in my head is I'm making this original 4 into a fraction, okay? So basically what I'm doing is this. I'm going to take that 4, okay, and make it into a fraction. See that? So this represents this. This is this. This is this. I know I need to multiply before. But when I multiply, I'm going to multiply with the reciprocal. So what this means is that this 4 will be this 4, but the reciprocal part is this. So basically, all I've done was taken this 4, multiply it with this 4, except I didn't do all the writing in here. I'm mentally doing this. Now, if you multiply these two fractions, remember you can diagonally reduce. That becomes 1, this becomes 1. And look at this. 1 times 1 is 1. 1 times 1 is 1. This equals 1. See that? This equals 1. So that's what I'm mentally doing when I do this. I'm actually doing all of this in my head to give you 1p. Okay? So when I say long story short, this is the short story, this is the long story. To why this is not 16, it's actually 1. So I hope that makes sense to everybody, okay? Because I'll always do the shortcut version, but just know I'm doing this in my head. We're going to practice some of these tomorrow too, so I can tell who saw the video and who didn't. All right, so now going back. So now that you understand this is actually a shortcut of this is the reason why you can just drop down your letter, because ones are invisible. Now I'm going to go on to the next problem, which is number 16 over here, okay? I create my street, this side of the street, that side of the street. Remember with two-step equations, I know you can probably hear the truck backing up in the background. That's because I'm sitting in a classroom with the window open. So just ignore that. So remember what you do to this side of the street, you must do to this side of the street. When we have two-step equations, it's best to add or subtract first. So what am I going to add or subtract in this part to get n by itself? Always look at a side that has the number, the letter with it. It's this positive 9, okay? I'm not going to subtract n over 4. Remember, fractions mean division. You have to add or subtract stuff first. So if this is a positive 9, I'm going to subtract 9 on both sides. See how this cancels out? Positive 9 and a negative 9 is 0. So I'm just going to bring down my n over 4. 15 minus 9. 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15 is 6. Okay. Now you brought it down to a one-step equation. Now you got to get rid of the 4. Remember, fractions mean divide, so do the opposite of dividing. Remember, shortcut version. I'm not doing all the reciprocal flipping and stuff on paper. I'm just doing it in my head. Because what will happen is this will cancel out and leave me with n. Don't forget, what you do to one side of the street, you must do to the other. 6 times 4 is 24. So n equals 24. Number 17. Add or subtract first, so I'm going to subtract 6. Subtract 6. That cancels out, leaving you x over 2. 4 minus 6 is a negative 2. I now will get rid of 2 by multiplying it out. Multiply 2 on this side. Remember, that's going to cancel out, long story short, leaving you x. Okay, negative 2 times 2 is negative 4. Okay, now, here are the nice ones we learned how to do just today. Okay, look at the difference between these fractions, this and this. See the difference? Yes, normal fraction, top-heavy fraction, or what I like to call junk in the trunk fraction. This fraction has got a whole bunch of junk going on top of it. So what's different than this fraction? So now the game changes. What's happening is when you have a fraction with a whole bunch of junk on the trunk, okay, you want to do multiplying or dividing first. Remember, fractions like this, no junk in the trunk, we did the adding or subtracting first. But when fractions have the junk in the trunk, I like to call it, you're going to multiply or divide first. So that means, since fractions are division, I'm going to multiply the 3. Remember, junk in the trunk, multiply or divide first, which basically means you need to get rid of the bottom number. of the fraction that has the junk in the trunk. When I do that, remember, long story short, what happens is the junk in the trunk will drop down. -2 times 3 is a -6. See that? So what you did by getting rid of the 3, dropping the junk in the trunk, that was your first step. Now your next step for this equation is a simple one-step equation. Getting b by itself, what do? Subtract 11. That's 0. -6 minus 11 is going to give us -17. So remember, fractions with junk in the trunk, you have to multiply or divide first. Fractions that look normal, you have to add or subtract first. Rewind that, make sure you understand. You'll be working by yourself tomorrow in class on these types of problems. Let's go to the next one. Look at that. Number 19 is another fraction with junk in the trunk, right? So instead of adding or subtracting, I'm going to multiply first. I'm going to get that 3 out of the way, right? Remember, long story short, this is going to cancel out, drop down your junk in the trunk. That's an A. -4 times 3 is -12. By doing that, you've reduced it to a one-step problem. So now, to get A by itself, I'm going to add 10. You have to do the opposite of what you see. Remember, do the opposite of what you see. If you have -10 here, you're going to add 10. Add 10 to that side, got to add 10 to this side. That cancels out, leaving you A. A -12 plus a +10. What do we do when we have a negative and a positive? You subtract. Keep the sign of the higher digit. So A is going to equal -2 in this problem. Going on to number 20. No fractions in here. So remember, add or subtract first. To get R by itself, I can see that I need to get rid of this 4 first by doing the opposite of what I see. I have now -12R. That cancels out. 100 minus 4 is 96. So now what I'm going to do to get R by itself is I'm going to divide. Remember, anytime you have a number and a letter right next to each other, it means multiply. So do the opposite of what you see. And when we multiply or divide, you have to keep the sign that's with it. If I do this, this cancels out, leaving 1 R. So I'll just put the R down. 12 will go into 96 8 times. It's going to be -8. There you are. So that was number 20. 21. There we go. So now, this side is street and that side is street. Remember, your job is to get M by itself. This is a normal fraction. This is not a junk in a trunk fraction. This is a junk in a trunk fraction. Okay? So, if it's not a junk in a trunk fraction, we're going to add or subtract first. I'm going to add this 9 out, because the subtraction is already there. What I do to one side of the street, must do to the other. I'm going to bring down my M16. Remember, that cancels out. -8 plus a +9 is going to give me a +1. Now, to get M by itself, fractions mean division. So I want to multiply out that 16. Remember, long story short, this is going to reduce down to 1M. 1 times 16 is 16. So M will equal 16 for number 21. I'm going to do one more problem because my time for this video is about to run out. I can only do 15-minute segment each. So I'm going to do number 23, which is another junk in a trunk fraction, so that you'll understand the difference between the two. Okay? So remember, junk in a trunk fraction, I'm going to multiply out first. That cancels, leaving me M minus 13 equals -8 times a +2 is a -16. Okay? Then I'm going to add 13 to both sides. M equals, adding 13 to both sides, 23 is going to be 3, -3. Ran out of time with this one. See you on the next one.